Hi, my name is Daniel, and I'm creating this video to kind of shed some light on what's going on at Changing Point Church. Uh, you're not hearing from a novice or someone who doesn't know. We attended there for 16 years. We were youth pastors for 8 years. We started with a handful of students and grew it to about 225 within the first 2 years. It didn't last and it didn't stay, unfortunately, because Changing Point Church is a G12 church. If you don't know what that is, look it up. Look up G12, look up Caesar Castellanos. It's a socialist system that works in socialist countries. And sometimes American pastors will see the growth that happens through those countries and try to model it to work in America. Fortunately, it hasn't really worked or grown very well here, but they're doing their best to make it work here and kind of trying to repackage it, but it's G12. So all I'm going to talk about in this video is our exodus and what happened, because we built relationships and had relationships with a lot of people at that church. The way we were handled and the way we were treated wasn't a way to handle people. It was mismanagement of what God has entrusted them with. And so I haven't said anything in 7 years. The only reason I'm speaking now is because of what happened to some students of ours who are adults now, that were spiritually abused tremendously. I won't share their story. I'll let them do it because it's not my story to share. But their last name's Johnson. Great couple. And so what happened with us is, like I said, we were there for 16 years, youth pastors for 8, grew a good sized youth group. Unfortunately, because of the system we were involved in, we weren't building on a firm, strong stone foundation. We were building on the sand. We were more charismatic, word of faith, prosperity gospel, feel good messages. But it wasn't really repentance. It wasn't really, now I know people are going to hear this and be like, oh, I went to an encounter and it is about repentance. It's about going to the cross and it's about doing this. We're going to have some encounter conversations later on. We're going to have some school leader stuff, G12 stuff, because I was there for long enough. I kind of know how that runs. So we're going to have conversations on that later on down the road. Like I said, I'm not really looking forward to that because this isn't really my thing. I don't like doing this, but because of the people that are being hurt, because of the people that are being taken advantage of, I can't just watch it happen and not do anything about it. So when we left, what happened was we were in an office over on Lincoln Ave. Lee came up to me in our office and he was like, man, I'm not sure what to do. I was like, what's going on? He was like, Eli wants another $500 a month to have life group at his house. What do you think about that? Like, man, I don't think nothing about that. That doesn't make any sense. Why would he want an extra $500 for life group at his house? He was like, well, it's for wear and tear on the furniture and stuff like that. And so I was just thinking that we're not doing that for everybody. Why would we do that just for him? That doesn't make any sense. Nobody was getting an extra $500 to have life group at their house. We weren't paid very well. Our first 3 years, I think we were getting right around $800. It started going up. When we ended, I think we were right around $2,000 a month. For the amount of hours that we spent there, the amount that Eli paid himself, it's not really, not that it's fair or unfair, but I definitely wasn't paid well for what I did. But when it came time to tithe, I was always questioned on my tithe. And to be 100% honest, I wasn't tithing at the time. The reason why is because we were making decisions if we were going to keep the power on or shut it off. Now I know with word of faith and the prosperity gospel, you tithe and you tithe and you tithe, and it's kind of like you give to a mob boss. And the reason you give to that mob boss is for protection. As long as you give to him, well, then he's going to bless you. We're going to go into more details of giving and different topics down the road, and you'll hear some truth down the road. You might not like it, but it comes from the Bible, so you can argue with that all you want. God's wrote it out, not me. I'm just delivering the message. And so we were in staff meeting, and they decided, before I even showed up, they had another conversation earlier that week or whatever, and they were saying that they were going to move youth from Wednesday night to Sunday night. And so I didn't agree with that. I didn't like the fact that was going to happen, because with students, especially our students, because we had kind of the rougher crowd, they needed a midweek pick-me-up. It's not just a Sunday to Sunday. They needed something midweek to reconnect with and re-engage with. That's the way I felt. And I was upset because I wasn't brought in that conversation. And so when that got brought up in staff meeting, and it was me, Eli, Lee, and two other people who I won't mention. They were in the staff meeting. If they want to let themselves be known, they're more than welcome to, but I'm not going to mention their name. So he could tell that I was upset. He was like, "What's going on? I can tell something's bothering you." And I was like, "Well, let's just talk after the meeting." He's like, "No, something's bothering me. Let's talk now." And so there were several things that were bothering me. Some of the things that were bothering me was that I was burning the candle on both ends. I was a youth pastor. I led a life group. I led a youth life group. I was the music director. I created the video content. I remodeled the church on Lindy Lane with some contractors. I was running and not getting compensated for it, and it was frustrating to be running as hard as I was, and to feel that it wasn't good enough, and that my giving wasn't good enough, and my serving wasn't good enough, and that God just wasn't blessing me like the prosperity gospel teaches. And so I was getting burnt out. And Eli said, "Well, what else is going on?" And I was like, "Well, you filed bankruptcy for $300,000+, and I had someone ask me why Eli filed that, because it's public record and people could see that. I had no clue, and I didn't know what to say. Eli was my spiritual father. I idolized that guy. I shouldn't have, but I did. That's the kind of culture that he creates around him. He says he doesn't want to be surrounded by a bunch of yes men, but everybody is around him is a yes man. You can push back a little bit. You just can't push back too hard, because if you do, my situation is what you'll find yourself in, and I'll get to that here shortly. And so I said, I didn't know how to defend you. How am I supposed to say, you filed $300,000+ bankruptcy, and then you have a new truck and you got a newer house, yet you filed bankruptcy? You're managing the church finances. You can't manage your own finances, let alone the church finances. And of course, if you ask, he doesn't manage the church finances. Somebody else does. Somebody else signs the check, but he says where the money goes. At the end of the day, he runs the church finances. And another thing that now, warning right here, you should watch for is see if you can see what the books are. Ask them to see what comes into the church and what goes out. You'll have a hard time finding that, at least back when we were there. And we've had several people that have recently left state that they've asked for the church finances, and they're giving a general kind of deal, but not really the church finances. So the church we attend now, I'm new to church structure. So we show up to these meetings. They're called business meetings, and they give you a little packet of paper, and on the top of the packet, there's the accounts that they have, what is in those accounts, how much the pastor gets paid, how much each person that comes to sing, do praise and worship for the church gets paid, any expenses as far as electricity, power, water, all that stuff, and then what goes in the benevolence funds, what's in the savings. So you get a full readout of everything that comes in and goes out to the church. That's the way church finances should be managed and handled. It should be an open book. That way stuff like this doesn't happen. It's not he said, she said. It's not, well, you don't tithe, so you can't see. Well, you're not a member. I understand that if you're not a member, that's might be a good thing. But, if you're a member of the church, you should be able to see where your money's going. And so test that. See if they'll let you see what the finances look like, and see if they'll give you a few months. Let's see if they'll let you go back 6 months. Hey, let me see the last 6 months of the church finances and see what's been going on. You're probably not going to get it. And you'll probably be looked down upon if you asked. And if you're not tithing, you'll probably be shamed for not tithing, because before you had to be a tithing member if you wanted to see the books. It's all kind of, it's not on the up and up. And so the finances were an issue. I told him, a couple Sundays ago, you said on stage that your father wasn't the man you needed in your life, so you became that man for other men. Now, I didn't have a dad growing up. I had a grandpa who played the role of a dad. I had some uncles that played the role of a dad, and my stepdad, who's my dad, came into my life when I was 14 when my mom married him. But to hear that from someone who has a good dad was a kick in the face, and it was an insult. He also stated that if it wasn't for me and my wife coming back from Texas, we wouldn't have the church we have today, and that's just not accurate. There are a lot of people who sacrificed and gave blood, sweat, and tears to have what they have today. The exodus from Texas wasn't a good departure. He was working for a guy named G.F. Watkins. down in Texas. I'm not sure on what the separation was or why they split or what exactly happened, but I know it wasn't on good terms. We're having conversations now to kind of figure out if there's a pattern of unaccountability that happened that started back there that's carried its way this way, but we'll find out. Um, and then the other thing was I was just burnt out, and so had this meeting, and this was like a 2 hour conversation. This wasn't just a quick little meeting. This was like a 2.5 hour meeting. A lot of emotion, a lot of tears on my side, because it's difficult to tell someone you idolize that there's areas in their life that they need to fix. But I was part of the team. I wanted it to be fixed. I didn't want anybody to be able to speak ill or bad about the ministry that I was a part of. And so Eli said, well, I could tell that you're burnt out and that you need a break. So I'm gonna set you on a sabbatical. I don't want you doing any of the ministry things that you're doing. All I want you to do is come to life group and show up to church on Sunday, and that's it. And so at that time, my mom was in her final month, and she was passing to go be with the Lord. And it was just amazing that everything kind of God planned it the way he did, because I was able to spend that last month just rebuilding that relationship with my mom that was kind of not in a good place, ended up being in a good place. And so he called me back into the meeting before she passed, called me and my wife and him and his wife. And so he asked me what the Lord has shown me for that month that I took off. And I said, I have everything backwards. I have your approval of me, and your pats on the back and your wife's is more important to me than supporting my family, than being a father, than being a husband, and making sure that my financial obligations are being fulfilled as a husband. And I said, the Bible says that a man who doesn't provide for his family is worse than an infidel. And he asked me if I was ready to be restored. I was like, I didn't understand the question. Restored to what? I'm not saved. I'm not a Christian. I'm telling you that ministry comes before everything else, and that's backwards. And I need to put my family first now. And he took me a long way around on this story. I don't remember what it was. And he came back to, are you ready to be restored? I still don't get it. The story had nothing to do with being restored. What do you mean be restored? And then me and my wife, and we have a multi-level marketing business. We had to do that at that time to supplement our income. Man, she was working as a bail bonds agent, and there were so many months that power was getting shut off, gas was getting shut off, just ends weren't being made. And so I had to do something to make ends meet. And so he said, you could do that business at Stone Church, you could do it at Breakthrough, you could do it at this church, but you can't do it here. And in my head, I was like, man, this guy, he's done so many different multi-level marketing businesses. As a matter of fact, many people at the church that have left and still attend got ripped off by possibly the biggest Ponzi scheme in Washington State. There was a guy here in town, he was doing a Forex, foreign exchange deal. And foreign exchange is legit. People trade on the foreign exchange market all the time. It's the stock market, but for money. Well, this guy said he has a robot that guarantees you 30% back of your investment every week or every month. And so he came to me and told me about this thing. And I was like, well, is it FDIC insured? No. Well, do you sign any paperwork or any kind of contract saying what you've given him? No. There's no more slots left open. So he's just doing this as a favor. I'm like, that doesn't make sense. He's like, man, I'm telling you, if you give me $1,000, yada, yada, yada. I'm like, man, I hope you pray about it, because I know this is your church, because he was going to put church finances into this thing. And I said, pray about it, because I know this is your church, but at the end of the day, it affects me, because where am I going to go? This is my church too. And he was like, well, I'm going to pray about it. Well, he prayed about it, and he came back a few days later, and he was like, man, you're a prophet. I'm like, haha, you're a prophet. Why would you say that? He was like, man, this guy just committed suicide. He was in his house robe and slippers and took his Harley and ran in front of a semi-truck. He was ripping off people on the West Coast, East Coast. This is probably the biggest Ponzi scheme in Washington State. Unfortunately, a lot of people got ripped off. A couple families lost their life savings in this thing. A lot of people lost good chunks of money in this thing. And you're going to tell me that I can't do multi-level marketing? I'm not searching. I'm not headhunting at the church. I told my wife from the beginning, church is church, business is business. Let's keep them separate. But it doesn't always work out. but for the fact that he would do multi-level marketing and got several people, different things, ACN, Advocare, this, that, and the next. He'd get them involved using his leadership, but he accused me of using my leadership to try and build my business. It just didn't make sense. So I told him, he told me that I could build that somewhere else, but not here. And I said, so I picked my family. I've already said that I've had them on the back burner and you guys on the front, and I need to make that right. And we parted ways. That was the end of it. We decided that I decided I got to do what's best for my family. And he thought that I was trying to headhunt at his church, which I definitely was not. So as I said, my mom was passing at that time, and we had already separated. We started attending another church, and when my mom passed, he decided to show up. I wasn't on good terms with him. I later on found out that I was given this as it's a hard drive to keep music on and do music things. And he gave this to me when I was employed there. When I started going through my hard drive, and I found 3 or 4 months of church finances, and I saw what he was getting paid. And I was like, this is ridiculous. How the heck is he going to pay me this amount when he was making this amount? I'm not going to state any of that stuff yet. I haven't talked to my attorney to know if I can show any of this content. Once I find out if I can, it'll be made public, because the truth needs to come out. People are being taken advantage of financially. They're using their spiritual gifts and the hype and the emotionalism to compel people to give. How many Heart for the House offerings were you part of if you were a part of Changing Point for the last 10 years? Several. Now I believe they have a building that they're buying, which is great. But what happened to all the money from all the other Heart for the House? This offering, that offering, building out. Money's not being managed well at that place. And it's your responsibility as a member to make sure that it is, because it's your church. People are being emotionally manipulated. People are being spiritually abused. Like I said, the Johnsons will share their story later on. It's not right. So I was supposed to be allowed to speak to the life group leaders of his 12, my group, and some of my student leaders. After he found out that I wasn't going to bend and I wasn't coming back, and I didn't agree with what he was doing with the finances or how people were being treated, he decided that I no longer could speak to anybody. And so he told me that I would be responsible for a church split if I continued to speak to his congregation members. And I didn't want to be known for creating a church split. I had no desire to split a church. And I didn't know then what I know now. Now, after the last 2.5 years of learning and listening to sound biblical doctrine, I should have said something back then, because that's the correct thing to do. When there's someone preaching or speaking another gospel, it's our responsibility to speak up. And why is that? We should correct leaders and pastors that are speaking inaccurately or contrary to the Bible, because it'll bring correction, because it protects the gospel that they say they so much love and care for. They talk about win, consolidate, disciple, and send. That's a great thing. But when you're diluting, contorting the gospel to fit your narrative and to make sure you're giving so that you can have, that's not correct. And so what happened to the Johnsons, like I said, was the last straw. We weren't allowed to speak to anybody back then. Now we're speaking out. We reached out to Changing Point Board of Directors, which is Art Sepulveda, Keith Jenkins, and Dave Minton. And we wrote them all letters because that's what they requested. When the Johnsons wrote their letter, they said they needed more proof of more people that experienced spiritual abuse. And so there was me, another gal, and the Johnsons who wrote their letters. The person that I thought would nip it in the bud ended up stepping away because of their relationship and being so close, which is understandable. I probably would have done the same thing. Well, they hired a third-party investigator that is supposed to be unbiased to come and do the investigation. Well, unfortunately, the investigation has been over for a little bit, and they had a meeting talking about how the investigation was over, and there was no spiritual abuse found at Changing Point. Eli was on the up and up, and everything's good. Well, here's the problem with that. I'm an accuser. The Johnsons were accusers. And then the other gal was an accuser. None of us got spoke to. None of us were investigated. None of us were asked any questions. Yet the investigation comes back as everything is fine, but we're not spoke to. The victims that were taken advantage of and manipulated didn't get to speak to the investigator. And now this Sunday, the investigator, who's a third party, unbiased, who doesn't know anybody there supposedly, is now speaking at Changing Point this Sunday. And I guarantee you he's not doing it for free. I know he's getting paid to show up because all pastors that show up to preach a message at Changing Point get compensated. And so what I'm asking for is accountability. What I'm asking for is honesty. What I'm calling for is not just, you're just bitter. Or you're just hurt. Or you're just trying to create division. No, that's not accurate. I'm not doing any of those things. I'm calling out the truth. If you want to continue to cover the truth with a lie, that's on you. But I won't be a part of that. I'm calling out for repentance, not because I'm angry, not because I'm bitter, but because now, and I didn't then, I did have resentment and I did have bitterness probably the first 3 or 4 years after we left, because of the way we were handled and the things that were spoken about us. We were told not to talk to anybody because we'd create a church split. And then the people that still attended there said, if you see the benders in public, be friendly, but don't associate with them because they're rebellious. They have a rebellious spirit. Eli told several staff and different people there that, even Jesus had his Judas, meaning that I was the Judas. If you were there for any amount of time and saw how me and my family helped build that church and how we defended that church, that's not true. That's just a cover-up. That's a cover because I don't have a good explanation to say why they left. And I would love to hear the comments and stories of what you heard of why the Benders left, because I know it was never really clear. It was always a fog. It was never they left because of this, that, or next. There was a bunch of little stories that never really connected. Well, you're hearing it from the horse's mouth. We left because finances weren't managed correctly, because of the pride that was there, because of the dishonoring that was happening, and because we were manipulated. We were manipulated by the system. And again, we'll share more videos down the road with how that manipulation and how those tactics work. So I pray that you hear my words in this video and that you really seek the Lord and that you really pray. I'm going to put some links on the video down below of Vadi Bakum, John MacArthur, some other really sound preachers that will validate the things that I'm saying. I'm not trying to create a church split. I'm not trying to create division. I'm trying to bring correction because people are being hurt, and the people that are hurting them are justifying that hurt and saying, well, it's just because they're bitter, or God's working on them, or they just didn't want to submit, or they weren't growing, or they weren't this, or they weren't that. There's all these things that you can say about people, but get to the truth. There's something wrong with the system. Something's broken. Something needs to be addressed, and something needs to be fixed. So I'm calling in this video for it to be fixed. Have a blessed day.